Good morning, friends. This is Gary Nassif in Las Vegas, and I want to talk to you about my experience with a miracle. I've experienced two miracles in my life, and this is the first. When a miracle happens to you from God, it's very important to share it with friends, family, and the world. And I am sharing it with the world today. And each one of you is so important, and I appreciate the opportunity. This is how the story starts. I was a sculptor in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, when I was teaching, and I did it at night. I had my own studio, and I had a welder, and the welder created things that I would direct, and together we just had a great time creating art for department stores and so on, and people who loved art. But I got a call from Sister Mary Lawrence, who was the administrator of Mercy Hospital in Cedar Rapids. She said, "Gary, your works that you've done for us are just wonderful, and we love them. But I want to commission you for another. Would you come in and visit with me?" So I went in, and I thanked her, and I said, "Sister, I'm ready to hear what you have to say." She said, "I want you to create a model for the Christ statue, which eventually should be mounted on a stone pedestal in front of the hospital, welcoming the sick to Mercy Hospital. And it should be a statue of the Jesus Christ." I said, "Oh, no, I can't do that." And she asked why. I said, "Because I don't know Jesus well enough." I said, "Sister, this is not a project for me." And she said, "Yes, it is." And she stood up from her desk and she looked at me and said, "You can do it, and I want you to listen to how I want you to do it." And I said, "You want it done in a traditional form, don't you?" She said, No. I want you to do it in an abstract form." I said, "Why? How can I get feelings from Jesus Christ with abstract form?" She said, "You can do it, and you will. And listen to me." And I listened. And she said, "I want the people who come to the hospital who are in need of healing to look on the statue of Jesus in front, welcoming them to his arms of healing. And that's why I want you to do it in abstract form. Because Jesus was torn apart for us, and he was lashed, and he was demolished in body, but not in spirit or soul. And I want you to show that in a model." I said, "Oh, sister, this is an enormous job. I'm not capable of it." She said, "Yes, you are." And so I went home. I told Mom, "What do you think, Mom?" She said, "Go for it." She said, "But get to know Jesus, because you can't do this without being his friend." So I read the Bible. I learned about Jesus. Mom said, "Gary, you need to feel Jesus and know him and have him as your friend, your closest friend. And then you can start the model of the Christ." So I prayed and prayed, that God would lead me. And the sister called, about 6 weeks later, and she said, "Have you started on the model?" I said, "No, but I will be very soon." She said, "How soon?" I said, "Tomorrow." She said, "Oh, I'm so pleased." So I called my welder, Joel, and he said, "Oh, you have the design for the Christ already?" I said, "Yes, but that wasn't the truth." And I just had to fake it. I didn't have it in my mind or in my spirit, but something was pushing me to call him, have him at my studio, and get started. But I had no plans. So I